starting with Mr. Russell. Should members of the U.S. Congress have term limits?
This is always a fun one. Even though our predecessor was perhaps arguably the one person who was the inspiration for term limits on the part of so many people, I'm actually not in favor of term limits. I believe the Founding Fathers got it right when they wrote the Constitution. And in fact, if you go back and you read the Federalist Papers and the intent of the Founding Fathers, James Madison in Federalist number 52 through 54, the Founding Fathers had no intent for there to be a limit on the number of terms congressmen set. See, they built the Congress, specifically the House of Representatives. It was modeled off of the British House of Commons. And in number 54, Federalist Paper number 54, James Madison writes about how some congressmen will be more gifted than others in getting elected and would become true masters of the people's business. He also believed that those who would be corruptible would be offset by long-term serving honorable congressmen. I used to carry around, and I need to pull it back out, because I had a list of about 17 or 18 congressmen who had served 25 years or more, who you never heard of, because they were never plagued by scandal or rocked by the accusations that have rocked so many. Those are good, long-serving congressmen who have served with honor, both sides of the aisle. But they offset the dangers that any one single congressman posed. And the problem with term limits is that one of the things it will cause is it will cause power to shift from elected representatives to unelected, long-term serving staffers. And that would be the worst outcome of all, because by the time a new congressman figures out what's going on, he would be out of power, and those unaccountable staffers would hold all the power. I can explain that more to any of you who have a question on it afterwards. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, truthfully, we already do have term limits. It's called an election. You don't like who's in, you vote them out. That's called a term limit. But one thing that we always talked about in the office was that rural America can frequently be left behind in a situation where you have term limits, because cities, large urban areas, have a larger population and therefore have more representatives and therefore have more power to bring things to help their area. You know, the population is where the tax base goes. So a long-term serving congressman with some influence can help his rural areas. And what you can see in western Pennsylvania is that, my staff's favorite subject, sewage and water. There has been so much sewage and water infrastructure done throughout our area, which is a building block for economic development. So without Mr. Murtha's influence, a lot of these projects may not have taken place because of earmarks that he was able to place in there, so that a sewage project didn't cost you $50 a month to pay your sewage bill. It came in at a reasonable price, and then your municipal authority could pay for it. So now we have sewage projects that are coming in at like $70, and that's becoming an acceptable amount, which is not acceptable to me. So, like I said, term limits exist. It's called an election.
As was just mentioned, the term is already limited to 2 years. And so what I'm most concerned about is how we conduct elections in this country. I find walking throughout the district a lot of voter apathy. People feel that their vote isn't really going to matter one way or another. And that's a large function of the fact of how we conduct elections. And the power of money and the establishment and the lobbyists in getting our members of Congress elected. And I think we find a huge disconnect that once you become a member of Congress, you see that a lot of members seem to be at least more focused on, because they almost have to, getting reelected and serving the interest of the Washington establishment and of the lobbying industry, instead of serving the best interest of the people here at home. Also, in this district, because it's so heavily gerrymandered, I find walking throughout the district, all 9 counties, which stretch over 150 miles, a lot of people aren't registered to vote. They don't even know which district they're in, and that's an unfortunate function of the way that our election laws are set up here in the region and the districting. And so I'd like to see, again, a better focus on how we elect our officials. letting other candidates come forward who might not have the financial resources to be what's considered a viable candidate. And I think in that regard, we're going to see a lot more quality candidates come forward, not only in our region, but across the board throughout the nation to move this country forward. Thank you.
Do you want to?
Well, let me tell you, before I got into this election, I was not in favor of term limits. But since I've been running, I am a proponent of term limits, and I'll tell you why. The biggest lobbyists and special interest groups in this nation, do you think that they support the Republicans or the Democrats? Anybody have an idea? That's exactly right, it's both. The largest special interests don't have an ideological soul. They don't care. All they care about is maintaining whoever is already in office. And I can tell you that there is a two-party system in America, but it's not Republican and Democrat, it's the incumbent versus the challenger. And even though theoretically you can vote them out, these elections cost a tremendous amount of money. And a lot of the money is raised from the special interest groups that, again, they don't have the ideological soul. They only care about maintaining whoever they've already influenced. And so my perspective is if term limits are good enough for the President of the United States of America, term limits should be good enough for the House of Representatives.
Volunteer fire departments across the 12th district are hurting for volunteers. The state has offered a $100 tax credit for active fire department members. Is there anything the federal government could do to help encourage people to volunteer their time to protect their community?
Well, I think one thing has to be said to start this off is that, you know, the volunteer firemen of this state, of this nation, it's really incredible. I mean, the amount of dollars that they actually save the state because of their volunteerism is just an incredible amount of money. I think it's in the billions of dollars. And it's amazing to me that these men and women go out and do this on a volunteer basis. You know, at the federal level, you know, one thing that I would not advocate is some sort of mandate that says people have to do something, but I think we should encourage our young men and women through the schools to get involved, and maybe it's not just volunteer fire departments, it's some form of community service, and hopefully we could drive people to volunteer fire departments. I think the state's on the right track of trying to at least give some sort of incentive to kids to volunteer. You know, at the federal level, we do have FEMA grants, you know, to help volunteer fire departments buy either vehicles or to buy equipment, but it really falls really short. I mean, the needs of our volunteer fire departments are so great. And, you know, when you see the volunteer firemen out there selling hoagies, you know, doing things like that, it really is a travesty, and we need to do more. But really, it starts at home. It's about getting your children and getting your grandchildren involved in volunteer fire department and community service, and we have to, we just have to keep promoting that. The children have to get involved, the parents have to be involved. I think that's the solution, not federal government intervention.
As I make my way throughout the district, I've traveled just, in fact, in the last 3 weeks alone, over 2,600 miles, and throughout all 9 counties, over 70 stops. I always make it a point to stop and talk with the volunteer fire companies. And what I hear and I talk, and when I hear from them,